Cascading Style Sheets, or CSS, has a large number of ways in which you can select parts of the page. For example, by using a full stop or dot, we can use a class that applies to many different parts of the page. A hashtag ID will apply to only one item on a page. We have used an element, such as header, to select a section of a page. We're now going to use element followed by element to select a part of a section of a page. So we are going to format the buttons in our navigation section to look more like buttons. To do this, we will use the navtd selector. We'll set them to centered, and we'll make them colored and rounded to look more like an actual button to be clicked. We're going to add another style to our style sheet. We could click into a navtd box, but again, we don't have to do this in order to apply the styles. What we do need to do is to add a new style here, and then make sure that we only take things from the nav section, and then a space, and make sure it only applies to each cell, each TD in the table. You're now going to design the look of a single button. So as before, we can choose to have a particular font. We can go for a font size. One of the things that will really help them look like buttons is if we go to block and set the text align to center. We also need to have a border, and that border, if it is grooved or possibly ridge, will be quite button-like. I'm going to make that a thin border, and the color I want to stand out on the page, so I'm going to have a nice reddish brown. I'm then going to have a background color, and my background color I will have a relatively pale yellow. In more recent CSS, we are able to include rounded corners on our buttons, and so we can put in some rounding. In this case, I'm going to choose to round it by 10%. Now this isn't easily shown in the viewer here. If I apply, you'll see that each of my buttons has now been centered and the formatting applied to it. We still can't see any rounded corners though. In order to do this, we would have to view them in an actual proper browser. So I'm going to go to File and Save All, and then I'm going to go to File, Preview in Browser, and I'm going to choose either Chrome or Internet Explorer to see how my page looks. And we can see now that the rounding has had an effect on my buttons. Moving back up to have a look at the style section, notice that in addition to the header, we now have new information that applies only to nav TDs, in other words, cells inside the navigation area. It will not affect parts of any other table, which is outside of the navigation area. And this is an important aspect of making sure that cascading style sheets only change parts of the page that we want to.